Hi, my name's Mickey Ferrugiaro, and this is a video class that goes along with the tutorial for my double twisted icicles. The icicle comes in 3 sizes, all instructions given for all 3 sizes, and they're basically a Cellini spiral that is tapered down. So I've made it nice and easy for you. I've done all the tapering in sections, and I really made this into an easy project because I want everybody to be able to make these. They're just too pretty, to not have them, around your house or on your Christmas tree. And I'm also making kits for them. I'm including 3 colorways in the tutorial. This is the gold colorway. I'm doing a blackberry colorway, which is the purple, and also the jade. So they're really pretty and very easy to make. So let's get started. The first thing that we do for the icicles, and this applies to all 3 sizes, and that's make the hanging loop. They're all done the same way, and that is with 6 A beads, a B, A, B. And you're going to string that 9 times, and then you're going to finish with 6 A beads. That way, when it curves around for our loop, you'll see you'll have the delicate section sitting up at the top. And the next thing we do is add one of our D beads, that's the regular 2mm, and our pearl. And I'm making the big icicle for this one, the large icicle. It's got all the decreases in it, and you'll be able to do the small and medium ones no problem after doing this one. Okay, so through the pearl, then we're going to add another of our B beads. Okay, so then you're going to go back up through the pearl and through the 2mm. And then we're going to go all the way through these beads again so that this string turns into a loop. So all the way through all of the beads. So once you've gone through all of the beads and you've got no sticky out bits where you've missed a bead, we want to pull these ends tight. So if you just take the ends together and pull the loop, you can tighten that up. And then to really ensure this loop, we're going to knot the ends. Just go through the loop and pull the knot in, and that makes our loop nice and firm. So complete that knot. Okay, and then I'm going to go back through the 2mm. You can see our little delica is sat into that big hole. So we're going through the delica, back down through the pearl, and up through the 2mm. It's going to let me do that. There it goes. Up we go. Okay, and then I'm going to weave these threads in through this loop, which will give it extra strength, and then I'm going to trim the excess. So that's the hanging loop that you're going to have for your icicle. So then we can set this aside, and when we come back we'll be starting the bezel for the pearl. So now we have our loop all done. We put that aside and we start working on the bezel. Now the bezel is done using MRAW, which is modified right angle weave, and I start that with a right angle weave stitch. So I have my 4 beads strung, and I'm going to go through the first 2 beads again. Okay, so if you hold it, the thread is coming down out of this side bead, the tail thread, and my working thread is coming out of the top bead. And this is different from with MRAW to right angle weave. Right angle weave, you'd have to be coming out of this bead. and this is where it differs. MRAW is a lot easier to do. You're also putting in the first row of peyote. So what you're going to do is add 4 beads, and then you're going to come up just as you would for a right angle weave stitch through that side bead. Okay, and then you're going to bring your thread forward, skip through the first bead that you added, and go through the next one. So if we pull this tight, you can see what we're doing here. You can see how that first bead of the 4 sits right there like a peyote stitch. And these are the other 3 beads, 1, 2, 3, which is what you'd normally have for a right angle weave stitch. The great thing is you're always in the same place on this one. With right angle weave, you're going down or you're going up. On MRAW, you're always coming out of this top bead, and that's what makes it so much easier. I know for people who have trouble with right angle weave, MRAW is just a dream. So you're just going to keep adding the 4 beads, coming up this side bead, a long thread here. Skip that first one, make sure your thread goes in front of it, and go through the next bead. Okay, so you're going to do a total for this of 18 MRAW stitches. So the way to count them is by counting these little up beads. Okay, when you have 18 of those sitting up, the ones that are in between the stitches, then we're ready to join. So we'll create a joining stitch to make it into a loop. Okay, so right angle weave stitch and then 18 MRAW stitches. So once you have your 18 stitches done, you're going to wrap this around your finger. Okay, so this tail thread is going to be going down. Okay, so make it so that you can see this is the side bead of that first right angle weave stitch. And here we are, this is the side stitch of the last stitch. Now to join an MRAW, you're going to add 2 beads, 2 of the delicas, and then you're going to go through that side bead of the first stitch. Then you're going to add another delica, and you're going to go up the side bead of that last stitch. So if you count, you have 2 beads here, you're adding 1 here and 1 here. That's the 4 beads that make up a stitch. But we're just utilizing that one from the first stitch. So skip that first bead and go through the second, just like you do for the MRAW stitch. Okay, so now it's joined into a ring. But we are missing that first, see we've got this gap here because that's where we need our 20th bead of the MRAW. We now have 20 of our little right angle weave stitches in there, so we just need to add 1 bead and step up to complete the MRAW for the bezel. Okay, so now it looks all even all the way around. Okay, so next we're going to work a row of peyote. Into those up beads of the MRAW, those that we counted, we're just going to work regular old row of peyote. And once you've done this, you'll step up at the end, and then you'll work 2 rows using your A beads, the little 15s. Okay, so I will come back when we've got that done, and then we'll put it onto the pearl. So here's the bezel after our 2 rows, our row of delicas and our 2 rows of 15s. You can see it's closed in quite nicely. And what we're going to do now is we're going to weave our thread down to the other side. With the tail thread, I'm leaving enough tail thread to go around the bead 3 or 4 times, 4 or 5 times, because we're going to embellish right here. So we may as well leave that thread there for embellishing. Then we don't have to add one back in. But if we embellish now, you'll crush your embellishments before you finish your icicle. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to use our tail thread and we're going to weave it down to the other side of the bezel. So weaving through the beads this way, and then when you get to that right angle weave stitch, you'll be going in that direction. And then it's a matter of which way you like to work. If you work counterclockwise, you'd go through this bead, and if you work clockwise like me, you will go through this bead. So there we're in position to start our next row, but we need to put the pearl in. So we're going to drop the pearl in, loop down, and you can see how nicely he sits. He doesn't fall through. It just is a perfect little encasement for it. It's kind of like an acorn right now. And then we're going to work 2 rows using our delicas. So just 2 rows in peyote stitch. It's nice and easy. You can see the beads so clearly working into the right angle weave. And just work 2 rows, and then we will be back to start the spirals. So now we have these 2 rows in for the bezel, and you can see it sits nice and snug on the pearl. If your pearl is still moving, don't worry about it. Gravity will take care of that once the icicle's completed. It will hang straight. The next thing we're going to do is place our beads for our spirals, and this is a double spiral, so we're going to have 2 points on it, and the point of our spiral is going to be the 2mm bead. So there'll be one over this side and one over that side. And what this does, having a double spiral, is it creates the closeness of the spirals so that it's a nice tight coil. So that's what we're going to achieve on this one. And you'll also notice the difference between a 2mm and a true cut bead. See, the size on those is quite different, yet they both are 2mm. So this one is the true cut, or a true 2. So 2mm true cut or a true 2. And then this is just a regular old 2mm. Some people are now listing it as a 2.5mm fire polish, fire polish round, just to make the differential between the two. So it's be careful if you're shopping for these, make sure you get the right ones. Okay, so let's place our beads. We have 20 stitches, so we have 10 beads for each of our spirals. So we're going to work on the large one. It's 3 of our little 15s, our A beads. And then 2 of our delicas. One of our little true 2s. One of our regular 2s. Another true 2. And 2 more of our delicas. You can see it's pulling this out to be a point already. And then we're going to add exactly the same for this side. 3 of our A beads. 2 of our delicas. A true 2. Our regular 2. Another true 2. And 2 more of our delicas. Now, while it's true with spirals, you don't have to do a step up. I'm doing them, and I'll tell you why. Take my advice. When you're doing a double spiral, you really want to remember that step up, because if you do a spiral, you lose track. And if you're only got a single spiral, you only have to count down your biggest bead to know how many rows you've got. But you've got to do that twice on a double spiral to make sure you're in the right place, and that can be a pain in the butt. I'll be honest, it drove me nuts because I tried it that way and I tore the thing out. I was like, no, I can't do this. The step up really helps. Another thing that really helps is I've made this into sections of decreases. So each section has got so many rows in it, and every row has got 2 of our D beads, our 2 millimeters. So what I suggest, and I've put into the tutorial, is count out how many you're going to need for each section. That way, when you finish the number of beads that you've laid out, your section's complete and you know it's time to decrease. It will save you a lot of grief if you do this. One of those wonderful tips. I have another one coming up too, so we'll make this as easy as possible. Okay, so that counts as row 1. Row 2 is exactly the same. Because we're working in the round, our beads shift 1 bead around each time. You can see how we've got this little angle going on, and that's what's going to create the spiral. It's absolutely no work at all. So we're just going to add our same beads all the way around. And this section actually goes on for 30 rows. So I have 60 beads here. I have 60 of my D beads, so that I won't get lost. You can see how it's leaning out already. That's what we want. I think spirals are really fun to do. I mean, it's basic peyote, which can get boring, let's face it. But when you've got the spiral going on, it's just so much fun to watch it work. So this is row number 2. That's our last bead, and we're going to step up. Okay, so that's row 2. You've got 28 more rows just like that. So here I am working row 3, and what I want to show you here is that if you push going into the spiral, push the beads against the pearl. Coming out, they want to lay the other way. So you're kind of going to create this little manipulation. So as you see, I've done this side of row 3. Let's go on the second side of row 3. Pull the beads in so that as you go into that 2 millimeter, lift it up, push that the little true 2 in. as it grows, you'll see just what I mean as the twist. It's a little corkscrewy as it goes onto these beads. So here we are. We're going to do our next fire polish, our little true two. Don't get your loop caught. Oh, I love when it shows you how I mess up. Because then you get to know it's not just you. It happens to me too. Okay, so here we are on the end of row 3 with our last 2 delicas and our step up. And this is what you should be looking like. Okay. So we're going to work a few rows on camera just so that you get to see how the beads are laying. And I'll get to show you a tip once we've got a few of them done. Actually, a couple of tips coming up because I'm getting shorter thread. Okay, so just pulling it in so it sits in nicely. And then we want our 2mm. True 2. Delica. Delica. Our 3/15s. 1, 2, 3. Back to our delicas. 1 and 2. So you see, pulling it across the bead really helps with the positioning. And then we need our fire polish, our little true 2, our regular 2, our D bead, C, B, and a B, and our step up. And with that step up, you know you can just count those beads to know which row you're on. Okay, so you can see how it's going. One of the tips I'm going to give you is I have these lovely little shovel tweezers, and what I do is I sharpen my coils. So I use the tweezers just to level out my beads. And you'll see me do this more as we go on. It really helps for the coils, is just to be doing this all down the coil. It just makes everything go into place. And you can do it just on the regular 2s or on the whole set. It just helps your coils stay in shape. You just do it all the way down. Okay, it gives you these lovely sharp coils. So that's one tip. We'll come and do another tip because I'm going to get short on thread. So I'm going to show you the Kath Thomas way of adding fire line. This is Kath Thomas, if you're familiar with her. She's a lovely designer out of Europe, and she came up with a way of joining fire line that saves the fire line. You use less, and it's not so much of a pain. There's no more weaving in. So I'll show you that once I need more thread. So you can see, you keep pulling this around, and you'll straighten your beads out as we go. You can see. You see that they're getting like wings on it. So much fun doing spirals. To our delicas. Pull that spiral in so it shapes nicely. Sometimes you've just got to manhandle the beads to manipulate them into place. And our last bead with our step up. Now, oh, lost my thread. It's time to add more thread, but I'm just trying to get through the 15s and you'll see why. So we're just going to thread our needle up again. And yes, that's how you thread a needle. You put the needle onto the thread rather than the thread into the needle. Makes life a lot easier. Okay, once I have these 15s in, I can do my Kath Thomas way of joining fire line. So here we are with our thread that we need to join and our new thread that we're going to add in. And hopefully you can see this. I've put some black paper underneath so that you can maybe see this a bit better. I'm taking my thread burner and I'm going to hold it so that the fire line melts that little bit. Can you see that? See how it's got a blob on the end now? When you feel it, you can see whether my camera's going to take it. You see that blob? That's what you want to create. And you want to create it on both ends of the thread. So here we go, heat it up, and you can see the thread moves away that little bit and creates that little blob. You see that? Okay, now the idea is that you then tie a knot. Just a regular old half hitch, right? So that you're tying this knot, keep it out of the way, and then you pull that both ends of your thread, and if you've got those ends blended enough so that they don't come apart, so you end up with a little blob on your thread. And with practice, you can make that quite small. Always give this a really good tug to make sure it's secure. But you can see we didn't waste any fire line on that. And I don't always use it, but definitely when I'm doing spirals, because it's hard to weave in thread amongst all this once you're spiraling. So this is a great technique. I'll show you some of the pitfalls as we continue beading. Okay, so now I'm back, and thanks to Kath Thomas, I now have this little blob on my thread, and my threads are joined. So let's show you how that works. You may have a little tug on it to get it through the beads. So on this, you want to really practice making your knots, your little blobs on the thread, small so that they go through the beads, particularly when we get to the 15s. That's the only issue that we have with it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit to get through the bead. There we go. This blob's a little bit bigger than I normally do, so you could see it. So, see, just might need a little extra tug to get through those beads. And hopefully we'll get it through the 15s. Sometimes you just got to slide it over that knot. There you go. And a little jiggle. Usually it's not a problem going through delicas and seed beads and everything. That it's usually absolutely perfect for that. But when you are working with the little 15s, obviously that's a tiny hole we've got to go through. So we'll see if we can get it through. Oh, it went through perfectly there. Okay, so we try again. Oh, perfect. So you can see, yeah, we're going through. So it might need practice to get this, small so that it goes through your beads, but it's a terrific technique to join fire line. It saves you quite a few feet of fire line per roll and all that weaving in. So thank you, Kath Thomas, the originator of this little burning technique. Okay, so we're working around. If you don't feel secure with the knot, one thing you can do is just before you get to the knot, make a knot under your thread and a bead, and then just pull it down, and so you can just make sure that that thread's tied in. So then if the knot did come undone, if this did come undone, you wouldn't lose a lot of beads. It would be an easy repair. And we've got one more delicate, and now we've got to do a step up. Now sometimes on the step up, when you've got that knot working in, you might go through one bead at a time. It makes it a little bit easier to get that joining through. There it goes. And then step up. There we go. And we're soon going to not have it to worry about. There we go. See, we're right on it there. Just ease it in. Okay. We've got it all tucked away now. One more small one. And now we're back to working knot free. Okay. So you can see, just working around with the spiral, you can see how it's closing in, wrapping around the bead. These sides going in and these sides going out. And you can see your ridges now, so you can take your tweezers and line your beads up. You can see how they go when you're working on them. Just straighten them up a bit. Okay, I do that throughout. I think it's maybe an addiction. OCD. Anyway, it makes my spirals really sharp. Okay, so continue working until you've got your 30 rows done. You'll see as it closes, you've now got this how you're wrapping it in. You push in and this one comes out, going into the curve and out of the curve. Okay, so work your 30 rows, your 60 beads, and we'll come back to do a decrease. So here we are after 30 rows. So you can see we've got quite the spiral going on. And we're on our first decrease. So for row 31, we are going to decrease. And what we're going to do is lose one of our 15s, our little 15s here. So we're going to go from 3 down to 2. And we're going to do that by skipping the first stitch. And then we'll be working 2 of our 15s. And then 2 of our delicas. Our C bead, that true 2, and a regular 2mm, true 2, two of our delicas, 1 and 2, and now we're going to skip this stitch. So I'm just going to go straight through those 2 15s and then work my 2 15s, then my 2 delicas, 1 and 2, our C bead, our D, C, B, and B, and this time we have got to go through that skip stitch. So we're going through the skip stitch. So we're going through those 2 beads and then we are stepping up. Okay, so that's row 31. Row 32, because I'll show you how the beads are going to lay on top of our decreases. So here we're working 2 of our 15s. If you heard that, that was a delica flying into my backing, my photo backing. Beads everywhere. Okay, so just working around. All we've done is just decrease those 15s from 3 to 2. Everything else stays the same. And here is where we're going to add the next bead. Our second delica, you see it's going to go over this gap. This is the skip stitch right here. So we're going to go right over that and go into the next 15. You see? So you can see that it'll close up as we go further around. So now we've got our 2 stitches in 15s. Give it a nice tug so that you're closing it up. A nice tension on the thread so that you don't have a lot of thread showing. Oh, there we go. So lift it to the camera, but look in the lens. Okay, so here you can see that as you're pulling it, you want to close this up as far as possible on that row. So you want a tight tension. And then we're back into our regular with our B's and our C, our D, and our C. There's our first of our B beads, and the second one is going to sit over this gap, and of course we're on our step up for the end of the row, so we're going to go through that bead and step right up. Okay, you see how that goes, and that bead will fall right in the spot there. Okay, so now you're ready to continue with this section. The section has 12 rows, so it's a lot quicker sections now, and hopefully you remembered to pull out your 24 of your D beads. Then you don't have to worry about where you are and counting how many rows you've done. Okay, so I'm going to finish up my other 10 rows because I've done rows 31, 32, so I have 10 more to go, and then we'll come back and do the next decrease. So here we are after section 2. Our icicle is growing, and we are ready for another decrease. And for this one, we're going to decrease one of our delicas on each side. So we're going to start, and we're going to do 2 of our 15s, and then we're going to skip a stitch. So we're going to go through the next 2 delicas. And then work a delica. Then we're back into our C bead, the D, the C, and 2 of our delicas. That's the other side of the fire polish. That's still got 2. And then 2 of our 15s, and that's our skip stitch again. So 2 of our 15s, after the second 15, you're going through the next 2 delicas. And then you have just 1 delica on that side. C bead, D, find the hole there, and another C, oh, earthquake, not really. Just my foot hitting my desk. Okay, and so here we're working our 2 delicas on this down side, and of course our step up. It's not going to let me go through 2 at a time. And my step up. Okay, so the next row, which is row 44, we're just going to work those beads, and you'll see where they sit over the decreases. The second 15 is going to sit over the delica that we skipped, that skip stitch right there. And then we work our delica. And it's a little bit bigger gap, but don't worry, it'll all fill in. It will work out. And on the other side, of course, we lost that bead. We still have the 2 delicas on the down side. 2 15s with that second 15 sitting on the skip stitch again. You see that there. The 1 delica, C bead. Oh, I keep losing the holes on the C bead for some reason. I think they're so shiny I can't see where the hole is. Okay. And another C bead. 2 delicas for the downside. And of course this is our step up. And it will look like a bit of a gap there. Because that... Ooh, flying beads. So the gap that you're seeing here, you'll see you actually have to fish for that bead when we start this next row. So as you go into row 45, you'll be digging for that bead because it's just going to sit way loose down there. But it will work out. You've just got to trust me. I know I get letters that say, I didn't believe you, I didn't think it was going to work, and then all of a sudden it did. I work it all out for you so it'll all come together. Okay. Our delica there, it's not sitting where I want it to. There we go. Sometimes when you're working right after a decrease, you can see it gives a sharp little angle, and that's where, you know, when you've worked a few rows it disappears, but you'll have an angle at the beginning, so just be aware of that. Okay, so this section has 12 rows, so hopefully you pulled your 24 D beads, so you won't have to bother counting. And so work these, and then we'll come back to do the decrease for section 4. I'll meet you back for that. So here we are after section 3, and we're ready to do the decrease for section 4. Okay, so what we're going to do on this one is we're going to now reduce these 2 delicas down to 1. So that's going to be our decrease. So we're going to start with our little 15s. We have 2 of them. That's the A bead. Two. Then we've got 1 of our delicas. One of our true 2s. One of our regular 2s. Another true 2. And we're going to skip this next stitch. So I'm going to go through the next delica. That way, skipping the first one means that the true 2 will sit over the gap. So if you've got a choice on which one to do, you know, when you're doing Cellini spirals, and if you're doing a shrunken spiral, a tapered spiral, if it's possible, you always decrease in front of a larger bead because it makes that gap easier to fill. On this we've got a mix, so it's not always possible. But if it is, that's where we do that decrease. Okay, so there we've got our 1 delica now. Back to having our 2 A beads. 1 delica. Our true 2. 2 millimeter. Another true 2. And we skip that stitch. Then we add our last delica and do our step up. It's only going to let me go through one bead here. Looks like my thread has tied itself around the bead here. There we go. Okay, I'll pop that baby into place and do my step up. Okay, so here's the next row, which is row 56, and we'll see, you know, where the beads sit over the gaps now, over the decreases. So our 2 15s, one delica, true 2, 2 millimeter, and our true 2 is sitting over that gap. So you can see here as I go through the next delica, it sits in. Then we have just the one delica. So we finish the round with our second section, 15, 15, delica, true 2, 2, true 2 that's going to sit over the gap, and then our last delica and our step up. Oh, it's not going to let me go in. There we go. Oh, it's only going to let me go through one at a time this time. It's just making me work hard. Okay, so now we just have one delica in the 4 sections, so 4 delicas on a round. It's kind of cool looking down the hole. Okay, so you have 9 rows to do, so that's our first 2 done. So we've got 7 more before we do our next decrease, and we'll come back for that, and that will be for section 5. Okay, so here we are after finishing section 4, and I'm just going to do my little tweezer thing with my to get my beads lined up. You will see that when you do a decrease you'll get a little wave, but that's okay because it looks fine in a swirl. Just lining up the beads, making sure that it all sits nice. I do this throughout while I'm doing it. Every time I finish a section, that's what I'll do. So it just keeps everything nice and sharp. Okay, so here we are, ready to start section 5. For section 5, we're going to take our little 15s down from 2 to 1. So what we're going to do is skip that first stitch. So now we only have one of our 15s, and then one delica, those do not like going on my needle, don't know why that is, true 2, and a 2 millimeter, true 2, a delica, and then we're going to skip that next stitch. So I'm going through both of those 15s. A tug, then we've got 1 15, 1 delica, true 2, oh, bead my hand in there, there's our 2, true 2, our delica, and as we put that delica in, that's where we skip stitch. So we're going to go through the next 15 and step up. And that is row 64. Row 65 is where we'll be covering up those skip stitches. So we're starting with 115, 1 delica, true 2, two millimeter, the true 2, whoop, getting my hand caught in the thread here, and our delica is the one that's going to go over the skip stitch, so through that next up bead, 15. Then we've got 115 again. We're going to repeat this. The 15. Oh, just 1 delica. 1 delica. True 2. A regular 2. True 2. Delica, and this is where we're going to go straight across because it's going over the gap, so we're going to go in those last 2, so that's the bead and the step up. Okay, so now you're back onto level footing, and you're going to just repeat that row through to rows 72, so it's 9 rows, so hopefully you pulled your 18 beads so that you know where you are, and we'll come back to work on section 6. Section 6, row 73. The decrease on this section is actually done by a bead change. I'm going to switch out the true 2 millimeters for a size 11 seed bead. So it's really nice and easy. There's not much other than that, just switching out a bead. So there's our 15. Our delica, and then instead of our true 2 we're adding the size 11 seed bead. It's just that bit smaller, and it's just going to take that size down that little bit that we need. And then we're going into the regular 2 millimeter, and then another of our little seed beads, which is an E bead in the tutorial. And then our delica. So it's so easy as this one. I'm not going to show you any further because there's no gaps to fill, so it's just switching out those beads. Okay, so this has 7 rows, so hopefully you counted out 14 of your D beads, and I will meet you back for section 7. Section 7, row 80. On this row we're going to be decreasing and losing our little 15 beads. So to start this row, we're going to do a skip stitch. So through the delica without a bead. Then we're going to work a delica, a size 11 seed bead, our 2 millimeter, another size 11 seed bead, and then a delica. We're going to do our little skip stitch, so we're going to go through the 15 and the next delica. Okay, that's our skip stitch. And then a delica, the 11 seed, our 2 millimeter, an 11 seed, and then our last delica. And of course, as we do this, we're going to do the skip stitch. So we're going to go through the 15 and then the next skip a stitch and do the next delica, and then our step up through the delica. So now the delica becomes our first bead. So for row 81, we start with a delica, and then an 11, our 2mm, another 11, and then our delica is going to sit over the skip stitch. And we have another delica, an 11, a 2mm, another 11, make sure you push those out so that the twirl's nice. And then we're going to do the delica, and it's going to go through above the skip stitch, and it's going to go through those top two delicas that are right there. Right there. So it's this is our bead, and then the next one is the step up. See if we can get through them both. There we go. Okay, so that's where we're going. Up through there. And then you should have nice easy rows. Those are 2 rows, and you'll do 5 more rows before we go to section 8. We're closing this in now. We're almost there. Okay, so work your next 5 rows, and we'll come back for section 8. Section 8, row 87. Okay, so on this row, we're going to decrease our 2 delicas down to 1 delica. So we're going to work our first row, which is a delica, a seed bead, and our 2mm. And then we're going to work our seed bead, our 11, and go through the next 2 delicas. Then we've got 1 delica, our seed bead, our 2mm, and then our seed bead, our 11, and we're skipping here. So we're going to skip through those 2. You can see that right there. And then we need to step up. Okay, so for the next row, we're going to start with our delica. A seed bead. Two millimeter, the seed bead, and this is the one that's going to sit over the gap. So as I go through the next delica, you can see that that's going to sit over in the gap there. And then we do that once more. Delica, the seed bead, our 2mm, and our seed bead that's going to sit over the gap, and so we're going to go through the 11 and then step straight up. Okay, so that's our step up, and as you see, the bead sits into the over the skip stitch. Okay, this section only has 5 rows, so that's 2 of them done. So I'm going to do the other 3, and when we come back, we'll be doing section 9. We're almost there, folks. Section 9, row 92. Okay, so on this one we're going to lose our delicas. So we're going to start again with a skip stitch. So all we're doing on this row is the seed bead, the 2mm, seed bead and skip stitch, seed bead, 2mm, seed bead, and we've got to go through our skip stitch, our first skip stitch. It's going to make me want to do it through two, so I'm going through that bead, skipping that stitch. We go into that bead and then stepping up. Okay, so we're really down on the beads here, hardly any left. So here we go, we're going to go seed bead, fire polish, seed bead, and we're going through so it lays on top. If you see, it's going to go on top. We're going to pinch that top together so it's closing up nicely, rounding it out, and another seed bead, the fire polish. Let's pinch that top together. And then our seed bead, which is going over our skip stitch, and then we're stepping up. Okay. And this is just, that's our first 2 rows, and there's only 5 rows, so nice and easy. We're closing this baby up now. Okay, section 10, our last decrease. And what we're going to do is we're going to lose one of our size 11 seed beads on this. So we're going to start with one. Then we're going to add a fire polish and go through the next 2. Add a seed bead, go through the fire polish, a fire polish and go through the seed bead, skip that next stitch and step up. Oh, if we can get our needle through there. There we go. Okay. So it's got to pinch the top at this point. Okay, so next row, our seed bead. Our 2mm is going to sit over that gap nicely. That closes it all up really well. Add a seed bead and then another fire polish. Go through, sits over there and step up. So you can see how nicely that's closing up now. And we're down to 4 beads. So we are doing a total of 4 rows, so we've just got 2 more to go. So here we go, there's seed bead, fire polish, seed bead, fire polish and step up. Come here, bead. There we go. And once more. Seed bead, fire polish, seed bead, fire polish and step up. Okay, so that's our icicle, and now we just need to add our drop. Okay, so we're adding the tip beads here, and It's pretty much the same for all sizes. The only difference is on the smallest one, I use a 4mm pearl instead of a 6mm pearl, just because the balance was much better. So what you're going to do is, coming out of that last bead, string the 6mm, a 2mm, a true 2, and a 15. And we're going to put those in. We're going to go back up the 2mm, the true 2, the 2mm, and the pearl. Okay, I don't want it to sit too tight. And then we're going to go through the fire polish and the next bead. We don't want it too tight because we want to pull this across. So, you know, don't pull it too tight. We're going to sit it right in the middle. So leave a little bit of looseness to it. We can tighten it up later. And then we're going to go back through those beads again, the tip beads again. And through the 15. I have a new thread on, so I've got a knot in there. I have my little join in there, so it's making life a little bit difficult. And so you're going back up through those 3 beads, the true 2, the 2mm, and the pearl. And back up again. Tug to get my join through. And then you're going to go through the other fire polish on the other side and the 11. Okay, and you want to get this a bit more balanced than I've got it right now. I'll show you a little trick. Okay, let's lay this down and do this. Hold the thread at this side, put your needle underneath so it's around the pearl, and come up through the loop. It's going to stay on there. Let's see if we can show you this. See, so I've got my thread coming through, and as I pull this around, it will tighten everything up there and make it, you know, centered. All of a sudden it's now centered because I've gathered, what I've done is I've gathered all those threads together right at the point of the bead. So then I can just go back in and work around. So I'm just going to weave this thread in just around the last, you know, 2 rows of beads. Let's see, just weaving around just to make sure it's all firm. And you can see it makes it sit really nice on top, or on the bottom as it really is. Okay, and now you're going to weave this thread in, and what I like to do is I like to go through all the fire polish so that I can kind of straighten them all up. So I'm just going through the points on this fire polish, the points on the you know, the ridges on the coils. So I'm just going through every one of them. It's a nice way just to weave your thread in, but also to straighten those coils up, because it, you know, when you can pull a thread all the way through, it helps them straighten. And the other thing you want to do is give your icicle a little tug. Hold it on the top and on the bottom, and just give it a tug to extend its coil. Don't break it, but just a nice pull. It should hold well. And then you've got it, you know, so that the coils are nicely situated. Okay, so the only thing we've got to do now, is besides finish off the thread, is we're going to use that tail thread from the beginning, and we're going to put in some embellishments just around the top of the bead. Okay, so we're ready to embellish the top of our icicle. So you want your thread to be exiting. You can see these beads, you see these 4 beads here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are the ones that go downwards. We're going to put a bead on top of there. So we're going to go into those top beads and working with our A beads, we're just going to add one in all the way around. Okay, so you're going to have 20 beads, and when you get to the end you're going to step up through the first one, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the second row. Okay, so we have that first row in, and the second row is our fire polish. Now on most of them I have used the 2mm, but on the purple one, because the 2mm was gold and my little seed beads were gold, I opted to use the True 2. So on that one, if you're buying one of my kits, there's plenty of the fire polish in there, tons of them. So you'll have plenty to make your choice, whichever way you want to go. So we're going to add the 2mm on this one. And we're just going to go around this peyote stitch. Simple little embellishment. It just kind of, when you've got it complete, it really makes the swirl look as if it's starting right at the top. Okay, so I'm going to finish that and come back for the last row. Okay, now we have all the fire polish in. We're going to do the last row. I stepped up, and so now I'm just going to add another row of the 15s in between. I have another join in my thread here, so you'll see me tugging. There we go. And if you are noticing my thread and saying, what thread is that she's using? Because it matches. This is actually Fireline that has been dyed. I got it from a place called sparklespot.com, and she dyes the Fireline into lots of beautiful colours. It's not cheap, and I kind of save it for my special things. But it is really nice sometimes just to have a thread that's just going to fade away into your work. For the most part, I work in smoke Fireline, but this just makes a really nice change. You can see instead of black, I've got turquoise. It comes off a little bit because, you know, it's dyed, but I like it. It fits in. Okay, so you can see this just curves this up a little bit. That's kind of nice. And you can always finish doing with this to straighten it all out. The wonderful tweezers. A tweezer shovel. Wonderful tool. So that's really all there is. Once I've done this row, I'm just going to finish my thread off, and that is a double twisted icicle. Okay, so here are the 3 sizes, all complete in the gold, and as you can see, Mommy, Daddy and Baby. How much work you want to put in to give a gift is up to you. You now have choices. It also works for how big your Christmas tree is, if that's where you're going to hang them. Other colours I have, that this will be kitted, the gold, purple, which I know everyone loves, and the jade that you've seen me working on. I will have a limited edition kit that I was hoping to show you on camera, which is why your tutorial is all pink and lime green, is because the colorway is actually a coral and lime green. But well, there was a little kerfuffle with the beads, and it is planned as a limited edition kit, so look out for it, grab it while you can. Thanks for joining me. I hope you'll look through some other of my tutorials and video classes and join me once again to make something interesting. Thanks.